Good Thursday morning to you. Welcome on into Morning JOX, JOX 94.5. Damian Mitchell alongside Conrad Van Order here on this Thursday, January 16th. Happy birthday, Mama. Hope you enjoy your birthday. Woman that gave me life. I appreciate you. Hope you have a wonderful day today. As she's getting ready to go to work this morning, I want to wish you a happy birthday. But we had some news in the college football ranks yesterday as one Texas quarterback has announced where he is going. Of course, the big speculation that, hey, man, he actually may be the highest paid guy in the portal. Well, we won't know. I guess we'll never know, as one Kanye West said, because Quinn Ewers has announced that he will be entering into the NFL draft. And Conrad, I think the biggest conversation and some of the things I was talking with some of my buddies yesterday of just, okay, do we look at 2024 as a regression year for Quinn Ewers, or was it pretty much what we saw last season, his entire career as a starting quarterback for the Texas Longhorns? And I'm in the middle on where he's kind of looked at projection wise as far as NFL drafts are concerned, because when you look at this quarterback class, really and truly, Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, they kind of separate themselves from the rest of the pack, where I don't necessarily see that much separation between a Quinn Ewers or a Jackson Dart or even for lack of better terms, Jalen Milroe, because I think his skill set is something that you like. But as far as when we watched Texas, it felt as though I never came away thinking that Texas won that game because they had Quinn Ewers. I think they were winning with Quinn Ewers, because you think about it, when he started to have signs of struggle against Georgia, they pulled him. Like, he's a guy that's played under Sark for pretty much the entire time he's been in Texas. And the first sign that you saw of him kind of slipping up a little bit, they put in Arch Manning. And maybe the pressure of having Arch behind you, knowing that you're going to still be in the quarterback competition in that room if you return for another year, probably started looking at the transfer portal and it's like, well, if Isaiah Bond's gone, are the pieces around me wherever I go, are they still going to be held? Are they going to be as talented as I had them when I was in Texas? Is the NIL money going to be enough? You know what? I'll just take my chances going to the NFL. See let the chips fall where they may. Because I think for Quinn, it's not like he's, fleet of foot. It's not like his skill set is definitely just that superior to other quarterbacks that we've seen or that are entering into the NFL draft. Because I had this debate with a couple of my buddies. I said I would probably take Jackson Dart before I took Quinn Ewers if I'm an NFL general manager. And seeing that Quinn Ewers is looked at as probably the number 3 quarterback in this draft class, and it's like, okay, well, look at some of the other quarterbacks, and if he's third, what's the separating factor between him and a lot of these other guys? Because to me, I think the way that Quinn Ewers delivers the ball, yeah, he has a beautiful deep ball, but how many teardrops do we see in the NFL? Because when you look at some of the guys, some of the things that you see, the intermediate routes with the throws across the middle, it's not like Quinn has much zip on the ball. And I'm thinking in the NFL with, guys that are professionals at their craft, that ain't going to fly. I think defensive backs are probably licking their chops like, okay, well, whenever you get in the ball game, I have a chance of getting an interception. Because you look at some of the bigger games that they played in, Quinn turned the ball over. So listen, I'm not mad at Quinn. Hey, go get your money. Go, to bank on yourself, brother, because you've gone out. You've had a wonderful career. But to be honest, I don't really look at his kind of NFL future as something that's going to be just spectacular. I think he's going to be known as, a Texas football legend, but I don't necessarily think that he's just going to be this must draft guy. Like, I don't think he's a franchise changer the moment he steps into an organization.
No, I agree with that. I think he's kind of banking on, going through the draft process, and it's not a good year for quarterbacks as far as the NFL draft goes. You kind of hit on it. It's going to be Cam Ward and Shedeur, and then I think there's kind of a big drop off, and a lot of people's eyes, Jalen Milroe's kind of that next guy. which again, I know a lot of people, Alabama fans especially, are probably like, really, like he's the third best or draft prospect at quarterback. But I mean, again, I go back and I look at a guy like Anthony Richardson a couple years ago, and if that guy's a top 10 pick and we barely saw him play,
Ooh.
you're going to have people that fall in love with Jalen Milroe because he's going to kill it at the combine. He's going to have great measurables. He's going to be personable, and somebody's going to fall in love with him. And I just don't know if Quinn Ewers is going to get that same. And again, it's not that he's a bad player. It's just, he's not going to run the 40-yard dash as fast as Jalen Milroe is. He's not going to be able to throw a ball probably as far as, somebody like Cam Ward is and these different things. And, he's going to have some questions, I would imagine, about his injury history because that's kind of been, not saying that it's necessarily his fault, but right or wrong, that's kind of a knock on him, right? Is we haven't seen him play an entire season of college football without getting injured. And going to the NFL, that's going to be a concern for some people. And, you asked the question of, if he's regressed, from 2 years ago to this past season. And, I think in some ways you can look at, numbers wise, they weren't all that different. Granted, keep in mind that in 2023, the first year that Texas made the playoff, I mean, he missed 3 or 4 games when he got hurt, and he didn't miss as much time this past year. But that kind of goes to show you when you're like, man, okay, he put up, similar numbers in 8 or 9 games last year that he was able to put up in 12 or 13 games this year for Texas. And maybe that's where some of your concern comes in. He doubled his interceptions. He had 6 in 2023. He had 12 this past year. But he did throw 31 touchdowns compared to 22 the year before that. Passing yards are exactly the same. Completion percentage went down a little bit. But, I look at him as, maybe somebody, really likes him and decides to take a chance, and he ends up being a day 2 guy. I think the first round's out of the conversation for him. But I think more realistically, you're probably looking at late second round or a third round pick kind of guy. And if you're a third round pick, on average, your contract's going to come out to somewhere between $5 and $6 million for your rookie deal. We had heard rumors that he was going to be offered that same amount of money for 1 more year of college football, not 4 years in the NFL. So, that's where, if he just wants to go to the NFL, maybe Texas had kind of told him, hey, if you come back, no, sorry, appreciate everything you've done for us, but we're going to, we're rolling with Arch Manning going forward. And maybe he decided he didn't want to go play anywhere else. And if he wasn't going to come back to Texas, he'd rather go to the NFL. So, we may never know the answer to that, but, I get it. You want to go, you want to compete. You feel like it's a weak quarterback class, so maybe you have a better chance of climbing up some draft boards. But, I mean, I'm with you. I think Jalen Milroe is a guy that will go ahead of Quinn Ewers because people are going to love his measurables and his athleticism. I think that Jackson Dart is somebody that is going to probably go ahead of Quinn Ewers because I think people will like some of the upside there, maybe a little bit more than what you could get with a Quinn Ewers. I think, where's Dylan Gabriel going to go? Because what's kind of his factor? Because I kind of view him and Quinn Ewers in the same light, right? Like they had good careers in college. Dylan Gabriel's been around for what feels like about a decade at this point, and they're good players. They're accurate. They're guys that you could see going to the NFL and having a nice career as a backup. Maybe they develop into more than that, but I think right now that would be kind of a projection. I don't think if you're drafting Quinn Ewers, you're expecting him to be your starting quarterback, later this fall. So, it's interesting decision. I'll be honest, like there's a part of me that kind of applauds him for, I guess, taking the traditional route of, hey, I've had my time in college.
Yep.
I could do the super senior thing and go make a bunch of money, but hey, I mean, feel like it's my time to go to the NFL. Maybe he feels like there's nowhere he could go that he would develop more. And who knows? He just wants to go to the NFL. So hopefully it works out for him. It'll be very interesting to see how the kind of the quarterback situation plays out in this draft. Because again, I think you're gonna have 2 guys probably go in the top 5 picks overall, and then I don't know if there's gonna be another quarterback in the first round. I don't know if someone's gonna fall in love with Milroe that much, or Jackson Dart, or Ewers or somebody. So it's gonna be very interesting. And I'll be honest. I thought when he announced that he was going into the draft, like after the game, I was like, okay, well, Carson Beck did that too, right? Carson Beck said he was going to the NFL draft, and a few days later he hits the portal, and I was like, surely the money's going to talk, but I mean, hey, if he's doing what he thinks is best for him, good for him. Maybe he's hearing something from, the NFL that we're not aware of in terms of what his draft grade is looking like. But yeah, I definitely thought that was a bit of an interesting decision because, hey, it's hard to turn down $4 or $5 million for 1 year. You get to go be, you're a quarterback on a college campus. You kind of rule the roost, be the king on campus for $5 million. Like, there's a lot of people that would take that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to your point about Quinn, it's just I don't know. I really don't know. Like if somebody texted in and asked, do I feel like he's the same level as Will Levis? And
I think he's better than I think Will Levis has probably, again, he's a quarterback that maybe has better measurables.
measurable, exactly.
But I think Quinn Ewers is a better player.
Yes, by far. And I'm a living witness. Yes, absolutely. He was better coming out of Texas. He's definitely better. I actually think now he's a better quarterback than Will Levis is. But it is what it is.
Yeah, I was about to say if I'm the Titans, I'd probably roll the dice on Quinn Ewers next year over Will Levis.
Nah. That's why we got the number 1 overall pick. We'll make better decisions, hopefully. But who knows?
So real quick, okay. So do you want the Titans to take a quarterback?
Yes.
Do you want them to take Cam?
Either Cam or Shador.
But you don't really care either way. Just one of them.
One of those two. Because I do think the weapons that you have around him, like at that point.
I mean, Calvin Ridley had 1,000 yards receiving this year with Will Levis.
And Mason Rudolph. He found a way to get 1,000. And we had a 1,000-yard rusher in Tony Pollard. Like, pieces are there. Just we got to find a consistent quarterback. Mm-hmm. And in the division that's gettable. Like winnable. we have the Houston Texans had 5 losses in the regular season. The Tennessee Titans were one of those. We went to Houston and beat them with Will Levis at quarterback. So it's not like the division is just head and shoulders given to Houston every year. Now they are the most talented.
10-7.
That's what I'm saying. Like they were knocking at the door. Like, hey, they can be beaten. So I think that I think that we will get either Shador or Cam, and really and truly either one would be fine with me. But I just know that the quarterback room is definitely a place that we need to start because I just don't think Will Levis is going to develop any more than what he is. Like he's exactly how he was in Kentucky. Like that's. The quarterback we saw at Kentucky is exactly who he is.
Yeah, no, it's the exact same dude. And so while we're kind of on this trend here talking about quarterbacks, I did want to throw this out there because I'm sure you saw it, and I know there's probably some people listening that maybe you didn't hear, I guess, how the story progressed. But yesterday morning we got that report or that story came out about Carson Beck and how Georgia, in the story, they essentially said that they had sources telling them that Georgia wanted him to come back to Carson Beck to come back and not enter the transfer portal. And then when he entered the transfer portal, Alabama was like the first team that called him about coming over out of the portal. And so first off, hearing that report, it was like, man, okay, that's kind of shocking because, he went into the portal with no contact tag. I think we all knew he was going to Miami where his girlfriend was, and we knew Miami was going to be in the market to pay a lot for a quarterback. So it just all kind of made sense.
Right.
And, we had not heard anything, at least on the Alabama front, involving Carson Beck. And so I know there are a lot of people concerned of, oh, man, how bad is the quarterback situation at Alabama if they're having to go and get Carson Beck? Like, they don't think Ty Simpson's ready or, Keelan Russell's going to need a full year and they're not going to give him a chance to, compete for the job or whatever. And it appeared that has been debunked now. It turns out that it looks like that was bad reporting on whoever turned that story in, and maybe they didn't have the best sources because there were no indications that Georgia had that kind of contact with him. Maybe they did, but certainly that Alabama was in contact with him about him going into the transfer portal and heading to Tuscaloosa. So I just wanted to throw that out there because I know we were talking about that a good bit yesterday, and we heard from some Alabama fans that were, doom and gloom. Oh my God, the quarterback situation's bad. We have to go pay millions of dollars for a guy, whose elbow is shattered right now.
Right.
Like, what does that mean for the future of the quarterback position at Alabama? So if you did miss the developments later in the day, it looks like that was just bad reporting. Maybe there's a little bit of truth to it, but at least on the Alabama front, it seems like there's no connection there. And I just want to throw that out there because I know that was a big story yesterday. And sometimes, sometimes things are just thrown out there that, maybe they're not meant to be published like that. They're maybe just said in passing. And
Right. And somebody takes it and goes with it.
Yeah.
And then it turns into a story. But hey, he's in Miami. It's official. Him and the old Carpenter sister. Hope they have a great time. And
I'm sure yeah.
we'll see what
They
Cristobal.
look like they're having fun in those videos that they make.
Exactly. Yeah, see what old Cristobal can do with Carson Beck at the helm at the University of Miami. And yes, Quinn Ewers has entered the NFL draft. Let's talk about the College Football Playoff National Championship. We're 4 days away from the showdown in Atlanta between Ohio State and Notre Dame. We'll take a look at the championship, kind of give a light little preview of just kind of where our head's at 4 days out. Do we think that Notre Dame can pull off this upset? Is it Ohio State's just to lose at this point? Want to hear from you as well. 205-834-9450. Keep it locked right here on Morning JOX and JOX 94.5.
6:20. Welcome back into Morning Jocks. Conrad and Damien here with you until 7 o'clock, running down some college football news from yesterday. The big news, Quinn Ewers announcing that he is going to enter the NFL draft. He will not be in the transfer portal. That would have been another interesting and very high dollar wrinkle there in the transfer portal, and especially after the Carson Beck announcing he was going to go in the draft and then deciding, no, I'm actually not. I'm going to go in the portal and go to Miami. And I think a lot of us were expecting Quinn Ewers to make a similar decision, but alas, he has decided that he is going to start his professional career and try the NFL draft waters out. And, whether that's ends up making him a second-round pick, a third-round pick, it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out for him. We are just 4 days away from the national championship game between Ohio State and Notre Dame, so we're going to start breaking that down for you. We also had some SEC hoops last night to get to quickly. But first, before we get to all of that, we have a very exciting opportunity here at JOX 94.5 that we want to share with you. And so if you are a Kenny Chesney fan, you absolutely want to listen up right now. Because No Shoes Nation is headed to a new dimension in 2025. Kenny Chesney is live at the Sphere in Las Vegas for 12 shows this May and this June, and you could be there. One winner here will score a trip for two to this once-in-a-lifetime concert experience. It includes a round-trip airfare to Las Vegas, a two-night stay at the Virgin Hotel, entry into the VIP pool party, and 2 VIP tickets to see Kenny Chesney live at the Sphere in Las Vegas. To enter, all you have to do is text the keyword Kenny to 95819. That's right. You can text Kenny, Kenny, to 95819. Contest rules are available at joxfm.com. Best of luck to all of you lovely listeners. Real quick, last night, SEC hoops, couple of matchups. This game was interesting for a while. But you had Tennessee and Georgia, a top 25 matchup there, and the first half of this game was it was pretty disgusting on both ends. Very low scoring, very good defensive effort from both teams. And then in the second half, Georgia comes out with a little bit of a lead, and then Zakai Ziegler just kind of takes over for Tennessee, and he had at one point 3 straight three-pointers for the Volunteers, and that was kind of all she wrote. He also broke the record for most steals all time there at the University of Tennessee. So a big night for the Vols as they, behind a big second half, knock off Georgia 74-56. Before that, you had a good game. You had South Carolina and Vanderbilt there in Nashville. South Carolina squeaks by the Commodores, Vanderbilt squeaks by South Carolina 66-63. At home there last night. And then the nightcap, you had the Red River rivalry of basketball. The first time the Texas and Oklahoma faced off in SEC play. Both teams winless in conference play going in last night. And Texas kind of dominated this game through and through until the very end. Oklahoma made it interesting. I actually was, I stayed up and watched the entire game, and Oklahoma got close with about 15 seconds left. It was a 2-point game, and you're just like, man, how are they able to come back on Texas like this? But ultimately, that comeback fell a little bit short, and Texas gets the victory 77-73. So Texas gets their first win in SEC play over the Oklahoma Sooners. And now Oklahoma, who started off the year on a 13-game winning streak, they find themselves on a 4-game losing streak and winless in the SEC.
Yeah, hey, SEC hoops. It's definitely it's gonna be a fun one. It's gonna be a fun ride. And back to the college football front. Just some news out of Tennessee. Of course, we kind of knew this was going to happen, but Tennessee Volunteers defensive end James Pierce announces that he will forego his senior season, also enter the draft. Expect his name to be called rather early on round 1 of the NFL draft. And also some injury news as their defensive back Jamont McCoy tore his ACL during offseason training, so it looks like it'll be a long road to recovery, but expect him to be ready at some point during the season. But that's a big loss right there for that Tennessee secondary, because he was the guy that was consistently, looked at as guard, the number 1 guy for other teams, and he held his own for a long time. And I think that, this is going to be difficult for them to process, but I think that, he has a speedy recovery and is able to get back on the field in 2025. So we're 4 days away from the national title game down in Atlanta. No SEC representation this year, but we do have Ohio State and Notre Dame. And kind of just an overlooking view of just how 2024 was for both Ohio State and Notre Dame and how they've gotten to this point. For Ohio State, you know, the two teams in the regular season, you know, they lose by 1 to Oregon in Eugene. Will Howard loses track of time, but you still had a chance to win that ball game. And you lose to one of your biggest rivals, the biggest rival that you have in Michigan. And you're going into the college football playoff thinking, man, it's Ohio State team. They've got pretty much the best roster constructed in college football, but you still have those two losses that, you know, you come limping into the college football playoff, and all you do is go out there and hang 40 on Tennessee. You get your revenge against Oregon. You win in an absolute dogfight with Texas. And now you're looking at all the pieces that you were able to bring in to start the year, finally get a return on your investment when you need it most. And it's not one of those like, oh, yeah, they're looking pretty good. It went 2 games in the college football playoff, and everybody's like, oh, boy, like this may get ugly for whoever is in Ohio State's way. And I credit a lot to Texas that, you know, I think Sark had a good game plan, but you really started to see that Ohio State is okay of welcoming a different style of fight, because that was the first time that their defense was going to be truly tested in the trenches. They were going to be tested in the secondary. You know, Tennessee, they sputtered. I mean, Nico looked like he was, you know, a freshman playing in a big time game. And Oregon was just completely shell shocked. You could smell. It's almost like everybody on Ohio State's roster was smelling blood. It was like, nah, we got to show y'all something. And then Texas, you know, it became more of a fist fight. It wasn't something that Ohio State's offensive line, they knew they were going against one of the best defensive lines in the country against Texas, and they got to Will Howard. Now, Will Howard still made some unbelievable throws. Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins proved that they were you know, the dynamic duo they are in the backfield. But the biggest name that we all were talking about was Jeremiah Smith, and he literally had no impact on the game. He only had a few targets, finished with 1 catch. And I think for Ohio State, especially on the offensive side, I think it's going to be difficult for Notre Dame to have an answer for everything. And I think I saw a little bit of that against Penn State, where, okay, Singleton and Katron Allen, you knew that they were going to get their touches, they were going to get their yards. But you didn't really neutralize Tyler Warren. And again, he was by far their best player, but you still found a way to win the ball game. And I think for Notre Dame defensively, it's because they play so physical and they swarm to the football. It's not that I think that Ohio State isn't going to be able to score points. It's, can they sustain back-to-back just absolute fist fights? And I don't think that Notre Dame really has a defensive back that could, you know, quote-unquote, stop Jeremiah Smith. But I do think some of the other weapons that they have shown and stepped up in situations where they need them. Like Travion Henderson taking a screen pass for 75 yards. It's like, if you're Texas, it's like, what are we doing? Like, this is the one thing that you cannot have happen. And it goes out and they execute a big play right before halftime. And I don't know if Notre Dame is going to be able, if they're going to have to create turnovers. They're going to have to create turnovers, because I don't know if they can go blow for blow with Ohio State because of how many other pieces around that offense that Will Howard has at his disposal. But I do think that Notre Dame can neutralize them as far as, you know, chewing the clock on the offensive side of the ball and welcoming, hey, like, Ohio State, we understand that this is the style that y'all want it to be. Let's see if you got 60 minutes in you. And Marcus Freeman, I think, is one of the best defensive minds in college football, and his defense reflects that.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, I think you brought up some good points there, and I think, you know, when I look at this for Notre Dame, you know, and how they can match up against Ohio State, you know, my concerns would be, you know, Texas has Jahdae Barron, right? And his job was to essentially neutralize Jeremiah Smith. And, you know, it wasn't just him, it was the entire defensive game plan and what they did. But you have arguably the best DB in the country back there if you're Texas, and Barron going toe-to-toe with who a lot of us thought was the best wide receiver in college football. And if you're Notre Dame, you know, it doesn't mean somebody can't step up, but right now you don't have a Jahdae Barron, right? You don't have a guy of that caliber that I guess I necessarily feel confident just, hey, one-on-one straight up against Jeremiah Smith, you're going to be able to win the majority of those matchups and those routes. And I also think for Notre Dame, if you look at the teams that they've played, to get here to the playoff or to the national championship game, okay, you played an Indiana team who, okay, they have a good offense, but I think we also now realize that part of that is the quality of teams they played this year. They were able to beat up on them pretty good, right? And then when you played teams with good NFL talent on defense, whether that was Ohio State or Michigan, that offense didn't look the same. And then the same thing happened when they faced off against Notre Dame, who has a very good defense. But they were, you essentially knew, hey, if we can make Curtis Rourke uncomfortable, we're going to have a good chance here. Then you go and you play a Georgia team without Carson Beck and receivers that don't know how to catch a pass. And you probably look at it as, hey, let's neutralize the run game. Let's try to make Gunnar Stockton uncomfortable. Don't let him beat us with his legs. And you can kind of make these games one-dimensional. And then you look at Penn State and some of the throws that Drew Aller was making, and you go, yeah, okay, they had their running game, and that was working for them. But Notre Dame, again, you could kind of focus on the run game. And if Drew Aller beats us with his arm, so be it. And that didn't happen, obviously. But now you're playing a team that is a well-rounded offense. They can truly beat you any way that they want to, whether it's running the football, throwing the football, like you said, even guys like Travion Henderson coming out of the backfield as a pass catcher and taking it 75 yards to the house. There are so many different ways that they can beat you. Heck, you neutralize Jeremiah Smith like Texas did, great. They still lost that game by 14 points. So, I just feel like this is going to be such a tall task for a Notre Dame team that, not saying they haven't played good teams to get here, not saying they haven't played really well, because they have, but this is just a different challenge in my mind because Ohio State is a more well-rounded team with the talent that they have on the offensive side of the ball than the other teams that Notre Dame has had to play. And I'll be honest, I mean, I heard, I heard Greg ask this yesterday in one of the interviews y'all were doing, but it essentially feels like Notre Dame is going to have to play a perfect football game if they want to win this game. And like you said, they're going to have to get the turnovers. You're going to need, early on in the Texas game, right? Travion Henderson has a big play, gets up, slaps a dude, 15-yard penalty.
Right.
Those are the kinds of things you're going to need to go your way if you're Notre Dame, in my mind, for you to be able to win this football game. And that doesn't mean that those things aren't possible, because I think as we saw against Texas, right, if you have a good defense and you have a good defensive game plan, you can keep this lower scoring, which is where Notre Dame is going to want to keep this thing. But again, it's just a question of if Ohio State comes out and they're firing on all cylinders and they're not making fundamental mistakes, as we saw in the first two games, and as it looked like we were seeing in Texas until they had that big penalty, when they're putting together back-to-back drives early on in a game and just driving down the field, that is demoralizing.
Mm-hmm.
Because we all know, right? The first drive is scripted, great. The first however many plays are scripted. Okay, you go down there and score. All right, well, now that we're in the game and we're having to make adjustments, let's see where it goes from here. And then, boom, next time on the field, it's a different look, and it's right back down the field. You're like, crap, how are we going to handle this? And that's just where you can't be if you're Notre Dame. So, look, I don't think it's any surprise. A lot of people are going to pick Ohio State to win this game. I know the line's pretty big, but I mean, everything I've seen from them, if they go out there, if it's a game versus a game, I think Ohio State's going to win and cover without too much of a problem. But if you're Notre Dame, it's like you said, you got to get the turnovers. You're going to have to. You cannot have turnovers on your behalf, and you're probably going to need, a couple boneheaded mistakes by Ohio State along the way. So it's going to be interesting, but Marcus Freeman, he's going to have his guys ready. And, I think Notre Dame, in that locker room, they're probably incredibly confident because why wouldn't you be? I mean, you've won, 13 games in a row now? So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But at least on paper, you would think that Ohio State has an advantage in a number of areas in this game, but that's also why we play the game.
Exactly. Which team do you think is hated more, Ohio State or Notre Dame?
Who do I think more people will be rooting for?
Yeah.
I think more people will root for Notre Dame.
And it's crazy that Notre Dame has become kind of this, I'm not going to say America's team, but you don't hear as many of the haters anymore because of the fact that Ohio State's on the other side.
Yeah, well, and I think it's the fact that they made it to a national championship game where they had to win some big games to get there. And that kind of helped prove, I think, to people that, okay, this Notre Dame team, even, contrary to, what some people still believe, this is not the same Notre Dame team that we saw the last couple of times they were in the playoff. And I think it now feels, oh, like maybe they have a legitimate chance to actually win a national championship and compete at that level. And I just also think, I mean, Marcus Freeman's such a likable guy. And I
Exactly.
think that is a big part of it is it is hard to not watch that team play and to hear him, talk in press conferences and things like that and not be like, yeah, if I was a college football player, that's the kind of guy that I would want to go and play for. And I think that's also why you've seen, him tied to places like the Chicago Bears and stuff of
Mm-hmm.
people can identify that. And especially for him being, I think, 39 years old now, it's remarkable. And yeah, I think just him and his personality, he seems like such a good dude. He seems like he really cares about the kids. I think a lot of people identify with that, and I guess Ryan Day has a little bit of the villain thing going for him just because he's the Ohio State coach, and I don't know.
Him and Lou Holtz, they still haven't patched up.
Well, I thought they did, and then Lou Holt said yesterday that if Notre Dame loses, it'll only be because they want Ryan Day to keep his job. So I guess they can keep being mediocre or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a weird beef. It's a weird beef. I
I'll
just
say there's no way Lou Holtz is tweeting that. There's no way Lou
exactly.
Holtz no, there's no way.
Oh man, 205-834-9450. Who are you rooting for in the national title game? Ohio State or Notre Dame? If you had to pick the lesser of two evils, which one are you rocking with? Do you think Notre Dame finally gets it done? Do you think that Marcus Freeman can rewrite the script of what Notre Dame football is? Or Ohio State, can they prove that you can buy the best roster and go out here and win a national title? Which team are you rooting for in the college football playoff? Also take a look at some NFL playoffs as well. So much more. 205-834-9450. Your text message, your calls on the other side. Keep it locked right here on Morning JOX and JOX 94.5. I like this.
Yeah, pretty good.
What's this?
Phoenix.
That's
Not
nice.
bad.
That's
Yeah.
a nice little vibe.
Yeah.
Okay, welcome back in the Morning JOX. JOX 94.5. I feel it's got a nice little groove right there, dog. Okay. C Mert on the ones and twos. Welcome back in, Damian Mitchell, Conrad Van Order, and you as well. 205-834-9450. Who are you rooting for in the college football playoff? And we've got some reaction, man. We've got some I like this. Who is this Conrad Van Chaos? Like,
I don't know.
do you bring chaos?
Apparently.
Huh. It says Notre Dame is so unlikable, but Marcus Freeman's likability outweighs it. Go Irish. Bring the chaos.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the fact that you have not to say that Brian Kelly is the most unlikable dude in the world, but I think if we're comparing the two, Marcus Freeman is infinitely more likable than Brian Kelly.
Man, if I knew my coffee wouldn't spill, I'd bang on the table. Like, here we are again.
Oh man, yeah, those Brian Kelly memes are still, because they're still coming around with Notre Dame making the national championship, and they're just and they're great. And I mean, you go back before that, and I'm just thinking like, for Brian Kelly, like a guy like a Charlie Weiss and stuff, like is that like Marcus Freeman? It's a different vibe.
It is. I'd love to see him coaching the SEC one day.
Plus, I think you have the fact of, the people that follow college football and especially how that whole thing went down. It's also kind of the fact of, so not to say that he was, the second choice or whatever. I mean, Notre Dame could have gone out and hired somebody, but to essentially feel like, okay, well, Brian Kelly just kind of abandoned the program and then Marcus Freeman had a lot of pressure on his shoulders. And now look at what he's done with that. I think that also makes him more likable for people because, again, Notre Dame's not a likable college football program, right? But just I think the circumstance of how Marcus Freeman kind of his rise to stardom as a coach, I think that's played a big part of it.
And I never really understood why people didn't necessarily like Notre Dame. And it's kind of like in that Nebraska boat for me of history has always told me that Notre Dame has been pretty good, which I've always like, okay, cool. It's just when I watch them,
that's exactly why people didn't like them because they still talk like, they're a powerhouse in college football and they have been a good program in our lifetimes, but they haven't won a national championship. And I think that's where it comes from. It's like, all right, you're talking all this talk, but it's the same thing with like Georgia fans, right? Until a couple years ago, it was, okay, you can talk all this crap all you want, but until you actually win a national championship, it's going to fall on deaf ears. And I think that's kind of the thing with Notre Dame is it's like, yes, we understand you are a blue blood. You have great tradition, all this stuff, but what have you done for me lately?
Yeah. And somebody texted in, it says, everybody's pulling for Notre Dame because Ohio State and Ryan Day are hated by everyone outside of Ohio State fans. And I'll tell you that Ohio State fans hate Ryan Day. Like, that's the kind of, like, I never really understood the hate that Ryan Day necessarily gets because I think a lot of it is just he didn't win the big ones, but he literally had Ohio State in every single big-time match.
Every other game.
That's right. I'm like, so we're mad at him for not winning some of the bigger games? Okay, like, that kind of happens in coaches' careers. But I think offensively, if you want a quarterback, if you want to coach if you want an offensive coach, you would definitely give Ryan Day a look because it doesn't matter who he has back there. The system just works. No matter how you slice it up.
Oh, yeah.
It works. And I think when you look at just these two fan bases and these two programs historically, yeah, like this is one of the, if this game was set in, say 1990, it would be talked about for days upon days. And now because the SEC has kind of dominated for so long, you feel going into this national championship game is, yeah, Ohio State, Notre Dame. Yeah, we kind of figured Ohio State would be there because they bought one of the best rosters this season. And then Notre Dame, you're kind of, well, who would they play? And that was the biggest question mark in the regular season. And then when the playoffs happened, it's, okay, now this Notre Dame team is completely different from years past.
So is this the least excited you've been for a national championship game? I don't know. Maybe you're really excited. But over the last couple of years, just because, for me at least, going back to even last year, right? We didn't have an SEC team in there, but everyone hated Michigan because of the cheating scandal. And I think that made it interesting where we all just wanted to watch them choke at the end of the year because we're like, okay, well, they're cheaters. They don't deserve it. And, we were all disappointed by that. Then, of course, you had Georgia TCU, which I think we were all just interested to see how badly Georgia would beat TCU, but that very quickly was, I think a lot of people turned that game off
Yep.
because of how bad it was. And then you just, you go to the years before that, and, Georgia getting their first title, Alabama beating Ohio State, the LSU, maybe the best team of all time. It feels like, in terms of interest, maybe it's just this part of the country in this area. I feel like I'm the least interested in this national championship game than in the years past in terms of, I think it's going to be a good game and I'm excited for that point, but I feel like the storylines and other stuff, it's like, okay.
Yeah. I'd put this one in Georgia TCU up there because kind of to your point on that one, it was, TCU is a great story, but do you really in your heart of heart think they're going to go out there and beat Georgia?
We knew what was going to happen. We just
Right.
didn't know it was going to be as bad as it was, I think.
Yeah, and this one, I mean, you could tell me that Ohio State kind of goes out there and handles their business with Notre Dame, and I would believe you. But I'd also believe you if you told me that Notre Dame pulls off an upset late. And I was like, yeah, I could see that happening too, just because of the style in which these two teams play. And Notre Dame, it's very methodical. Like, it's old school. It's the new school flavor with old school principles. Like, they are going to run the football.
Yep.
Don't matter what 11 you got on the other side. They are going to run the football. They're not going to ask Riley Leonard to go out there and just light them up. I don't even know if they have enough plays in the playbook for that to happen. But they're going to play fundamentally sound on defense. They're going to swarm to the football. They're going to hit you in the mouth. And then offensively, they're going to ground and pound. Where Ohio State, I mean, they can ground and pound you. Well, there's a lot of flair to it. Like, it's a lot of Will Howard making, exceptional throws to exceptional talented receivers. And then their defense has shown up when they need to. So I think that both sides of the coin, you can kind of see, you can sway me either way of how this game's going to go. I will give our final picks on Monday of the day of the national championship game. But we'll keep the conversation going, seeing some more phone calls, some more text messages coming in. 205-834-9450. Just who are you rooting for in the national title game between Ohio State and Notre Dame? We'll discuss that when we return here on Morning JOX and JOX 945. 6:53 here on Morning JOX. JOX 94.5, Damian Mitchell, Conrad Van Order here with you for a few more moments as we get you set for McElroy and Kublik in the morning. Follow that up by three-man front from 10 to 2. And then the legend himself, Paul Feinbaum, from 2 to 6 here on JOX 94.5. So you don't need to touch that dial. Just getting your reaction of who are you rooting for in the national title game. Got some text messages coming in. Somebody text in and said, I'm pulling for Notre Dame. Wish we could get Marcus Freeman at Alabama. Ooh. You know, I think you got a good one over there now.
Yeah, but I think there's going to be a lot of schools that, he would be a popular coaching candidate if he were to ever want to leave Notre Dame. I'll just say that.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think Kalen DeBoer is pretty good too.
Somebody texted in, the only way I could root for Notre Dame is if they were playing Auburn.
Even over Ohio State, I don't know. Personally, for me, I really think that outside of the SEC, I dislike Ohio State more than anybody.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of gotten that way with Clemson. I don't know. Like, I don't necessarily not like them, but I don't love them either. It's just kind of
And Ohio State's like, Ohio State's like, it's like rooting for Alabama. It's like rooting for the Cowboys. It's like rooting for the Lakers or the Yankees. Like, it's the same thing, right? It's just the Big Ten version of it. So
yeah.
No one's going to be feeling sorry for Ohio State if they lose on Monday. Let's just put it that way.
Not at all.
You'll have some people, oh man, that was such a great run by Notre Dame. They just came up short. But if Ohio State comes up short, no, you're not going to be getting any of that. No.
Where's Lou Holtz, huh?
He'll be having a field day.
You know he will. Fanboy, he texted in. He says, I'm going for Notre Dame because it will prove that a paid roster cannot win you a national championship.
I think that's part of it, too, is, not to say that Notre Dame didn't spend millions of dollars on their roster, too, but I think when we found the $20 million number, when that was reported last year, I think that is stuck in a lot of people's minds. Because it was the first time that we really had a tangible number of, okay, yeah, this is getting out of hand.
Yeah. And I mean, for Notre Dame with them, they got deep pockets too now. They ain't got to report theirs.
Yeah, and they're making a lot of money off of the playoff as well, a lot more than Ohio State is.
You better believe it. Shared revenue. Ha! Notre Dame laughs in cash. Like, we'll take that. We'll take that. Should be fun to see. We know who's going to break it down some more. That'll be McElroy and Kublik in the morning. They're coming up here at the top of the hour. Keep it locked right here on JOX 94.5.